مساء الخير Batra Daf Kuf Bet Amud Bet starting new Perek Bet Kur. When I did this Masah 12 years ago, it was very hard, and I was reviewing it. Happy to report that it's just as hard as I remember. But Baruch Hashem, I think we're gonna do it simply. Don't be scared. Eitan's here. Someone told his friend Bet Kur Afar Ani Moichelach. I'm selling you a field that has a size of a Bet Kur, certain size. If there were holes in it at 10 tvachim deep, or there were rocks 10 tvachim high, that's not considered part of the field, and there has to be more added to the sale to make up for it, because that's considered separate entities. So there's a massive ditch or a massive rock, that's not considered part of the field. But if it's less than 10 tvachim tall or 10 tvachim deep, it's counted. I mentioned to the buyer, I'm selling you around the bed core. Even if the rocks or pits are deeper than 10 tefachim tall or deep, because I said to you around 10 a bed core, I didn't say exactly, then it's considered part of the sale. Someone makes their field hekdesh during the times of Yovel. So for a bet zera chomer se'orim, it's the biblical price of 50 shekel kesef, 50 silver shekels for every bet chomer, which is the fancy way of saying bet kor. And chomer is a bet kor rather. And that amount of space is 50 shekels each. So not going into details. If there was ditches 10 tvachim deep or rocks 10 tvachim tall, and then they're not counted part of the field, and are not redeemed at the 50 shekel price. But if it was less than 10 tvachim deep or high, then it is part of the sale. How come it's not counted? If it's part of the field, okay. If we see from our Gemara, especially, that it's considered a separate entity, so a person should be able to buy that 10 tvachim deep ditch or rock tall at 50 shekel rate separately. Gemara says, maybe you might answer, Kevin lo have a bet cord low cut, maybe since it's not a full bet cord, it doesn't become a hekdesh. But it says opposite to that. The pasuk says it's a field. What does it mean teaching by added the word field? Once we mentioned already that a chomer of barley is 50 shekel kesef, the price, and the elah shetish opinion maybe it only applies in this specific way, only a full chomer, a full bet cord. The word said that teaches us that any amount of land is subject to the price. So we see from here, again, they were saying, how come those ditches or rocks are not considered separate hekdesh and you have to pay full price of 50 shekels? The Gemara says, over there, it's referring to the ditches are filled with water. They're not meant for planting, and therefore it's not considered eligible for this 50 shekel price. The economic, because you could infer from the wording of the Mishnah, because also the time you do the same, because it compares it to rocks. Shmamina, like the rocks you can't be planting, such as the ditches are filled with water, also are unplantable and therefore not part of the sale. That's the case. If it's based on plantability, even if it's less than 10 tvachim, it should also be part. If it's still with water, but it's even 5 tvachim, doesn't have to be 10 tvachim, it should also be excluded. But we know it is counted towards the bet cord. The Gemara says, that's considered cracks of the land, and the rocks are considered the spine of the land, it's common, and therefore they are considered counted. But if it's over 10 tvachim, it's too significant and excluded. Hachamai, in our Mishnah, what's the reason that more 10 tvachim deep or tall is not considered bet cord? Even if they're not filled with water, it's not included. Famous concept: a person's trying to buy a property. He doesn't want these ditches that are so deep or these rocks sticking out. A person doesn't want to buy a single piece of land that has the appearance of multiple properties. I have a question. Our Mishnah mentioned that it's similar to rocks. So just like the rocks are not plantable, so to these are not plantable. And therefore it sounds like dry pits would be part of the sale. The Gemara says, no, when we compared it to rocks, which is unplantable, is referring to under 10 tefachim, right? So, yes, under 10 tefachim, if it's filled with water, it's excluded. It's included even though they're filled with water. However, if it's more than 10 tefachim, it's not counted even if it's dry because the person doesn't want different property that looks like different properties. Now, our Mishnah mentioned Pahat Mikar is under 10 and it's counted. Rabbi Yitzchak, Shim Hashamru, when we said it's rocks, Bet Arba'a Kapin, it's only if it's no longer than on 4 kav of the property. But if the rocks are more than 4 kav, it's not required. That only applies to it's 4 kav of rocks over 5 kav of land. But if it's smaller than that, it's too much and too small. No, it's referring to when the rocks are spread over a majority of the field. If it's 4 kavs of rocks are more, then are in more than 49% of the field, on less than 49% of the field rather, then it's not considered part of the field. There's too much rocks in a small area. Let's say the 4 kavs of rock are under 50%, or the less than 4 kavs of rocks are on most of the field. The inverse of each opinion. Is that counted or not? Next question. Pay attention to the pictures, it helps. Kishir ma, what if it's like a bracelet, which means it's like rows and rows and rows? Look at that first picture, top left, of Rashbam. It's tendin huma. What if it's like the horns of kishurara? What if it's a row, goes straight down the whole property? It's not enough to be excluded because it's not the quantity. But if it's going down the center, for example, it's a whole row. It's tendin huma. What if it's like the horn of a bull, where it just starts sticking out to the sides? Next, that's the second picture on the left. What if it's a zigzag? The third picture on the Rashbam. Teku, no answer. Tana, if there's only one rock by itself on the boundary, even if it's small, it's not counted. I can't have my boundary of the field that I'm selling be a rock. But it's next to the boundary, even if it's next to the boundary, also excluded. Next section. There's a small separation of earth between the rock and the boundary, less than 3 tefachim. What's halacha? Is that considered next to the boundary or not? Take it. Next. Let's say there's earth. It's not just a rock. There's earth underneath it, but there's a rock on the top of it by the border. It's the opposite. There's dirt on top, but there's a rock underneath by the boundary. Take it. It's telling you a bet core of land. Measured by rope, which means an exact amount. If it's I gave him any amount less than a full bet core, I have to deduct. If I gave you any amount more, has to be returned. If I you a bet core more or less, even if I gave you a field containing a quarter kav per sa'a, which is obviously less than the bet core, or added that much, the sale goes through because I already told you more or less. You tell me if it's more than a quarter kav per sa'a, it's a lot of extra. The guy can make a deal with the seller. When you're making the deal, what are you returning? You're returning cash. But if the seller wants, you return land. Well, the Gemara doesn't explain all this. How come you have to return cash if usually you can buy the extra land? Because you want to help the seller, because we don't want the seller just to be left with a tiny piece of land next to the field that he just sold. So we say, just give him cash for the extra land. Because what's considered extra, a significant amount of land? The equivalent for a field would be 9 kav, ubaginav for a garden would be bet hasi kav, a half a kav, akiva bet rova, or a kiva would hold a quarter kav. The buyer would return the land. So we see that the reason is we want to protect the seller with being left with a land too small. And therefore, when you're returning, you're not only returning the extra quarter kav, but also returning all the extra land. Again, everything will be explained in the Gemara.